The structural integrity alarm on line 4 went off at 5:47 in the morning. Not the warning level, the critical level. The kind that means something is already wrong, not just heading that way. I was standing at the floor entrance when Louis Screer jogged over, sweat already on his forehead, even though it was November and the loading bay doors were open. "Carl, the whole quality system is locked up. Nobody can get in. Production's down, inspections down, batch tracking's down. Everything 340 workers standing at their stations with nothing to do, machines frozen mid-cycle, finished structural beams sitting on conveyors that wouldn't move." I could see the overnight supervisor walking in circles near Station 6, phone to his ear, talking to someone who clearly didn't have answers either. I knew exactly what happened, and I knew exactly why. My name is Carl Hartley. I'm 50 years old. I've worked at Hartwell Steel Fabrication in Pittsburgh for 26 years. Started as a floor technician right out of trade school, worked my way up to senior operations director. Yesterday morning, they locked me out of the systems I spent 16 months building. Today, they're finding out what that decision actually costs. Let me back up. 16 months ago, Crestline Industrial Corp bought out Hartwell. It was a family-owned operation for 31 years before the sale. The kind of place where the guy running the crane in Bay 3 knew the owner's kids by name. After the acquisition, Crestline dropped a $2.8 million efficiency overhaul in my lap and told me to fix things. Plant productivity was down 18%. Defect rates were up 24%. Our biggest client, a major infrastructure contractor out of Philadelphia, was making noise about pulling their contract if we couldn't hit their new quality specs. They gave me full authority. Redesign everything: workflow, calibration, quality protocols, supplier integration, all of it. I didn't start at a desk. I started at the floor. First thing I did was walk every inch of the plant with the workers themselves, not the supervisors, not the team leads. The people actually touching the steel 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Hector Ruiz from Station 9 showed me how the conveyor timing created a 38-second dead cycle every single run because incoming pieces arrived at the wrong angle for the stress inspection arm. 38 seconds sounds like nothing until you realize it happened 400 times a shift, which meant we were hemorrhaging nearly 4 hours of production time every single day, and nobody in management had ever noticed because nobody had ever asked Hector. Gwen Tillman from Quality Control walked me through why our testing sequence was running backwards. We were catching stress fractures at final inspection that should have been flagged at the third station. By the time a defective piece made it to Gwen, it had already consumed 80% of its processing cost. I spent 2 full months just listening. What I found wasn't pretty. The official process documentation hadn't been updated in 5 years. Half our quality failures came from workers quietly building workarounds to fix design flaws that nobody in management knew existed. These weren't people cutting corners. They were actively preventing disasters every single shift and getting no recognition for it. Marty Flanagan, who runs equipment maintenance, had been compensating for a timing drift in the press sequence on line 2 for 3 years by manually adjusting the calibration every Tuesday morning before first shift. It wasn't in any documentation. If Marty retired tomorrow, line 2 would start producing out-of-spec components within a week and nobody would know why. That was the real picture of Hartwell Steel before I rebuilt it. The redesign took the full 16 months. We didn't shut down production. I built a rolling upgrade system, optimizing one section at a time while the rest kept running. Every change got tested by the people who'd use it. Every modification got explained before implementation, not after. The resistance came from middle management, not the floor. Supervisors who were used to managing by reports and metrics didn't like a system that required them to actually understand the processes they oversaw. But the numbers told the story. Within 9 months, productivity up 31%, defect rates down 38%. Worker injuries dropped 42% because the new layouts were designed around how people actually moved, not how an org chart said they should move. Our Philadelphia client renewed their contract for 4 years instead of the standard annual review. Crestline noticed. Other plants in their portfolio started asking for our protocols. I got invited to speak at fabrication industry conferences. For the first time in 26 years, I felt like I was building something that would last past the next quarterly report. That's when Nate Aldridge showed up. 31 years old. MBA from Wharton, hired as Digital Transformation Director to provide strategic oversight on the final implementation phase. Crestline's idea of modernizing the project leadership. He had every buzzword ready: AI-driven optimization, Industry 4.0 integration, digital workflow architecture. He also had the ear of Roy Davenport. The new CFO Crestline had brought in 5 months earlier from a software company in Seattle. Roy had never run a manufacturing operation in his life. He believed, genuinely believed, that any industrial process could be solved with the right algorithm and the right dashboard. To Roy, Nate represented the future. Young, credentialed, fluent in the language of modern business transformation. To Roy, I represented something that needed to be managed on the way out. Nate started slow. That's what made him effective at first. He came in polite, enthusiastic, full of questions that sounded like genuine curiosity. Asked to sit in on my floor meetings. Wanted to review documentation, just getting up to speed, he said. Wanted to understand the full scope so he could support the rollout properly. He'd walk the floor with his tablet, nodding at everything, asking workers how they felt about the new protocols. Seemed engaged. Seemed like maybe this wouldn't be as bad as I'd expected. I gave him read-only access to the core systems 4 months before final rollout. The board wants to understand the technical foundation, he explained. They need confidence that the approach scales to other facilities. That was my first mistake, not giving him access. That part was reasonable. The mistake was not watching what he actually did with it. I found out later from system logs that Nate wasn't just reviewing the architecture. He was tracing through every decision tree, every conditional statement, every exception handler I'd built over 16 months, spending hours at a time not reading the system but memorizing it, learning it the way someone learns a lock before they pick it. 2 weeks after I gave him read access, he came back asking for editing privileges, found some optimization opportunities, he said. He had a presentation ready. Charts showing projected efficiency gains of another 18% if we implemented a series of targeted modifications. The slides looked impressive, clean graphics, confident projections, benchmarks pulled from industry reports. I should have asked to see his underlying data first, should have demanded a technical review before agreeing to anything. But the numbers on the project were already strong, and 18% more would have made this the most successful plant turnaround in Crestline's portfolio. And honestly, Nate had Roy's backing, and Roy controlled the budget for next year's expansion phase, so I gave him the access. That was my second mistake. And unlike the first one, this one had consequences I'd spend the next several weeks untangling. The changes started small, easy to miss if you weren't looking for them specifically. He modified error handling routines in 3 of the quality subroutines, subtle adjustments that didn't break anything immediately but shifted how the system responded under load. He adjusted timing sequences in the batch processing logic. He altered the feedback loops that allowed floor workers to flag anomalies before they became stoppages. Each change, taken alone, looked like a minor calibration. Together, they were a map of how to make the whole system fail at the worst possible moment. Lewis was the first one to say something to me directly. He pulled me aside on a Tuesday morning, voice low, making sure nobody nearby could hear. "Carl, something's off with how Nate's been asking questions, not normal project questions. He keeps pushing scenarios. What happens if this protocol gets modified? What happens if the worker alert system gets disabled during a peak run? Keeps asking about failure modes," Louis paused, "and he's been talking to people about knowledge transfer protocols. Sustainable leadership transition." That phrase landed hard. In corporate language, knowledge transfer means one thing. They're planning to move someone out, and they want to make sure the operation survives the transition. You don't use that phrase about someone who's staying. That night, I stayed until 11 p.m. going through the system logs line by line. What I found made my stomach drop. I pulled every change Nate had made since I gave him editing access, mapped each one against the original architecture. When I ran projections on his modifications, not against theoretical benchmarks, but against our actual production data, they didn't improve anything. They introduced failure points at exactly the moments of highest stress. Peak production runs, shift changeovers, high-volume batch cycles. The modifications were designed to hold up under normal conditions and collapse under pressure. He wasn't optimizing my system, he was booby-trapping it. I confronted him the next morning, kept it calm, kept it factual. "Nate, I was reviewing the recent changes to the core protocols. Walk me through the reasoning on the error handling modifications in the quality subroutines." He didn't hesitate, didn't show anything. Minor calibrations based on the latest performance data. Nothing that changes your fundamental approach, just tightening the execution. He pulled up that same presentation, clicked through it with the ease of someone who'd rehearsed the conversation. The modeling shows we can push efficiency another 18% if we reduce some of the redundancy in the oversight loops. Where's this modeling data coming from? Some of these metrics don't exist in our tracking system. Predictive analysis based on industry capacity benchmarks, standard methodology for this type of optimization. He said it the way people say things when they've never had to defend a number to someone who actually knows what the number means. That's when everything became clear. Nate wasn't here to improve my project. He was here to inherit it, and the fastest path to that was making the current version look unstable. His modifications would cause conflicts during peak cycles. The failure reports would point to design complexity. The system would look like a black box that only one person understood, and that person, me, would look like the single point of failure. When it crashed, he'd be standing there with his cleaner, more automated version that didn't require anyone with 26 years on a fabrication floor to operate it. Roy would get his modern technology-driven solution. Nate would get his promotion, and I'd be the old-timer whose overcomplicated approach couldn't hold up under real-world demands. I spent that entire night building my defense. First thing, backed up every original algorithm to a personal server. Full timestamps, complete version history, documentation that showed exactly what I built when I built it, and every modification made after Nate received editing access. If this ever went to a technical review, I needed a paper trail that was airtight. Then I started making calls. Marty Flanagan picked up on the second ring. I told him what I'd found in the logs, didn't editorialize, just walked him through the specific modifications and what they'd do under load. Marty went quiet for a moment, then said something I already suspected. Carl, Nate came to me last week asking about the press tolerances on lines 2 and 4. Wanted to know the exact threshold where we'd start seeing stress fractures in the weld joints. Said it was for failure mode documentation. Marty paused. I've been doing maintenance contracts for 18 years. Nobody doing legitimate risk documentation asks questions that's specific about breaking points. That's not how you document risk. That's how you find out exactly how hard to push something before it snaps. Beverly Reyes called me back within the hour. She'd been getting uneasy for 2 weeks, but hadn't wanted to say anything until she was sure. He's been asking HR questions that don't make sense for someone running an implementation project. Grievance procedures, timelines for performance remediation, whether temporary contractors could be brought in on short notice to cover skilled positions during a transition period. She kept her voice even, but I could hear the edge underneath it. Carl, he's not asking those questions because he expects the rollout to go smoothly. He's asking them because he already knows it's going to go wrong, and he needs to know how fast he can replace people when it does. Hank Mercer, who handles our equipment maintenance contracts, gave me the piece that locked everything together. He called me directly 2 weeks ago, wanted to discuss modifying the redundancy protocols in our service agreement, said the current safety overlap was creating unnecessary operational friction and he wanted to streamline it. Hank's voice was flat. When I told him any changes to the service agreement had to go through you first, he got quiet. Then he started asking whether our contract was up for renewal and whether we'd be open to discussing terms with new plant management. There it was. Complete picture. Nate wasn't just planning to let the system fail. He was methodically removing every safety net beforehand, the maintenance redundancies, the worker alert systems, the feedback loops, so that when it failed, it would fail hard and clean with no cushion. Then he'd blame the complexity, blame the legacy approach, blame the human variables I'd built in on purpose because I understood that human judgment wasn't a weakness in the system. It was what made everything else work. I didn't sleep much that week, but I wasn't panicking. I was building. 1 week before the final rollout, they called me into a board meeting. Roy was there. Nate was there. 2 executives I'd never met from Crestline Corporate were seated at the far end of the table with printed presentations already in front of them. That told me everything about what kind of meeting this was going to be. You don't bring pre-printed presentations to a discussion. Roy started with the setup. Appreciated everything I'd built. Significant improvements. Undeniable results. And there it was. Concerns had emerged about the long-term sustainability of the current approach. Nate took over from there. He was smooth. I'll give him that. He walked through his slides with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed the delivery a dozen times. My algorithms as dangerous black boxes. My reliance on worker feedback as a subjective variable that introduced inconsistency. My approach is a system that worked because of one person's institutional knowledge, which made it, by definition, a single point of failure for an $80 million operation. Every concern he raised was real. Every risk he identified existed. What he didn't mention was that he'd spent the previous 6 weeks creating all of them. We think it's appropriate for me to take operational control through the final implementation phase, Nate concluded. Carl transitions to Senior Technical Advisor. Available for input on complex legacy questions, but day-to-day authority moves to my team. The two Crestline executives nodded, like they understood what they were agreeing to. Roy looked relieved. Nate looked like a man who'd already mentally moved into the office. I sat there watching it happen and made a decision. I could have fought it in that room. Could have pulled out my logs, laid out the modification history, walked them through exactly what Nate had done to the system and why it was going to fail. Part of me wanted to. The part that had spent 16 months on 12-hour days and genuinely cared whether this plant kept running. But I also knew that a room full of people who'd already made up their minds isn't a place where evidence wins. The presentation was finished. The org chart was already printed. Arguing in that room wouldn't stop what was coming. It would just make me look defensive and give them a reason to walk me out faster, so I let them finish. They handed me the revised org chart with my name in the new box. Nate shook my hand with both of his, told me my contribution to the project had been extraordinary, said the transition would be seamless. Professional courtesy so polished it felt like a performance. That was my third mistake, not fighting harder in that room. Not because I could have won, but because the workers deserved someone willing to say out loud what was actually happening to the system they'd helped build. I was tired. 16 months of caring more about that plant than anyone else in that meeting, and I let exhaustion make the decision for me. They locked me out that afternoon. Badge deactivated, system account suspended. Parking spot reassigned. Nate walked me to my car, hand briefly on my shoulder at the door. Get some rest, Carl. You've genuinely earned it. I drove home, sat in my kitchen for a while, then I picked up the phone and started making the calls that actually mattered. Louis picked up on the first ring. They locked me out this afternoon. I said, Nate's running the show now. Silence for a second then. That's insane. He doesn't know a quarter of what you built. Half of what makes that system work isn't even in the documentation. It's in the relationships you built with the people running it. Doesn't matter right now. What matters is that when his modifications start causing failures, people are going to need someone to call. Make sure they call you first, and you call me. Beverly said it cleaner than anyone. They can change your title. They can reassign your parking spot. They cannot reassign 26 years of people trusting you with their livelihoods. That's not transferable. Hank was the most direct. Nate called me again today about the service contract. I told him the same thing I told him last time. Nothing changes without your sign-off. A pause. I know you're not technically in that role anymore, but as far as my company is concerned, you are until someone shows me something in writing that makes sense. That was the thing Nate never understood. He had Roy's authority. He had the org chart. What he didn't have was anyone's confidence. And in a plant where everything ran on trust built over years, that gap was going to show up fast. I drove to the diner across from the plant the next morning, corner booth by the window, same spot where I used to eat lunch during the heaviest months of the rebuild. From there I had a clear line of sight to the main entrance, the loading bay, and the contractor parking area. I ordered coffee and I waited. The overnight run hit its first hard failure at 3:47 a.m. according to Lewis's text. By the time first shift arrived at 6, the cascade had already spread through 3 of the 4 production lines. Workers clocking in were finding machines frozen mid-cycle, quality stations locked out, batch tracking completely offline. The morning supervisor was standing in the middle of the floor with a printout that wasn't telling him anything useful because Nate's modifications had also broken the diagnostic routines. The system couldn't identify its own failures. By 8 a.m., delivery trucks were stacking up on the street outside because receiving couldn't process incoming materials. Finished beams sat on the loading dock because shipping couldn't access the inventory database to generate release documentation. I watched 2 trucks pull out of the line and leave, $58,000 per hour. My phone was going steadily. Nate called 6 times, Roy called 4 times. A number I didn't recognize, Crestline Corporate, called twice. I let all of them go to voicemail. Louis texted at 9:15. Nate told the floor supervisors it's a temporary integration issue. Nobody believes him. Marty found 3 of the modifications in the press sequencing and showed them to the shift lead. People know. At 10:40, Roy called again. This time I picked up. His voice had none of the confidence from the board meeting. Carl, we have a situation with the rollout that requires your technical input. I'm not involved in operations. That's Nate's area now. This is a temporary systems issue. We need someone who understands the architecture. What kind of issue? Production has been down since the overnight run. We're looking at significant losses, and the diagnostic systems aren't giving us clear failure data. A pause. I could hear alarms faintly in the background. Someone shouting across a floor. Nate believes the issues are related to some legacy documentation gaps in the original protocols. Legacy documentation gaps. That's what 16 months of work was called now. The failures aren't documentation gaps, I said. They're the direct result of modifications made to the core error handling and feedback architecture over the past 6 weeks. I can tell you exactly which subroutines are conflicting and why, but I'm going to need full system access restored, written operational authority, and a formal agreement that no changes are made to the core architecture without my written approval. Long pause. Done. How quickly can you be here? I finished my coffee first. When I walked back onto that floor, the difference was immediate. Workers who've been standing around with nothing to do visibly settled, not because I'd fixed anything yet, just because they knew someone who understood the system was back in the building. It took 14 hours to fully correct Nate's modifications. Not because the fixes were technically complicated, most of them weren't, but because I documented every single step. Every original state, every change Nate had made, every correction I implemented, and why. By the time I was done, there was a complete technical record of exactly what had been done to that system and by whom. Nate stayed for the first 4 hours watching and taking notes. He asked good questions, actually. Once he stopped trying to defend his decisions and started genuinely trying to understand the interdependencies, you could see he had a real analytical mind. He just had no foundation to build on. He'd been handed a system he didn't have the experience to read, and he'd treated it like a software problem when it was a people problem wearing software clothing. By evening shift, all 4 lines were running. By end of week, we were operating at numbers better than before the lockout. The board meeting happened the following Tuesday. Roy opened with an apology. Not a long one. He wasn't built for extended self-reflection, but it was direct. He'd made a judgment call based on the wrong information, and he was acknowledging it. I respected that more than I expected to. The offer was VP of Manufacturing Operations, 35% salary increase, direct reporting line to Crestline Corporate. Quality Standards Authority across all 4 plants in the portfolio. Nate was reassigned to Junior Operations Analyst, reporting directly to me. 6-month structured learning program, starting on the floor. I accepted both. For the next year, Nate worked under my supervision. Not boardrooms, not presentations, the actual work. Learning to read a line by watching it. Learning to hear a machine running wrong before the diagnostic caught it. Learning why Marty's Tuesday morning calibration on line 2 existed and what happened if you skipped it. He turned out to be a decent analyst, once he stopped trying to fix things he didn't understand. Sharp eye for data patterns when the data was real. He just needed 26 years he didn't have yet, and the only way to get them was to start earning them. The plant is running at 134% of baseline efficiency now. Crestline adopted our protocols across 3 additional facilities. The $5.2 million expansion is funded and breaking ground in the spring. 90 new positions, 40% capacity increase. People ask me sometimes if I regret how I handled it. Whether I should have fought harder in that board meeting or walked out entirely and let the whole thing collapse on its own, here's what I know. The best outcome isn't watching someone fail. It's being so essential to the operation that their failure becomes impossible to hide, and then using that moment to build something that lasts longer than the politics that created it. They locked me out of my own system. What they actually locked themselves out of was competence. And when that bill came due at $58,000 an hour, there was only one person who could pay it. They thought they were replacing me with someone newer and more compliant. What they got instead was an expensive lesson in the difference between credentials and knowledge, between understanding a system on paper and understanding why it works. You can steal a man's access card. You cannot steal 26 years of knowing exactly what breaks and why, and exactly what it takes to hold it together. That's not something you take. That's something you earn, and no org chart in the world, changes that the real danger in any organization isn't the ambitious young man trying to climb over you. It's the leadership that mistakes a polished presentation for a proven track record and only figures out the difference when the machines stop running. They handed him my access card and thought they handed him my knowledge. What they actually did was run a $464,000 experiment to find out those two things are not the same.